Get ready to dive into a world where every whisper can reveal a riddle, and each tale is an open door to the astonishing. But before we embark on this journey, remember, if you enjoy unraveling mysteries and exploring the unknown, subscribe to our channel and leave your like. Help us bring more stories like these to you. Get ready to question what you know is reality. Are you ready to begin? Let's go. About 2 years ago, I lived through a frightening experience while residing in the house I grew up in a small town in Oregon. I had recently inherited the house from my grandparents, and my brother decided to live with me and my wife while he studied at a nearby university. At the time, both my brother and I worked at a local bookstore, but I worked the morning shift while he and my wife worked at night, which meant I spent many evenings alone. A few weeks before the incident, I noticed a black car with tinted windows frequently parked near my house. I didn't pay much attention to it, thinking it was just a neighbor or someone visiting the area. However, one night, while taking out the trash, I realized someone was sitting inside the car, watching the house. I couldn't see the person's face due to the darkness and the tinted windows. That same night, after my wife and brother had gone to work, I heard knocks at the front door. It was around 11 p.m., which seemed odd to me. Looking through the peephole, I didn't see anyone. I called my brother, but he said he was still at work. A few minutes later, I heard a loud noise coming from the backyard and the sound of something hitting the back windows. I locked all the doors and windows, turned off the lights, and hid in the bedroom. While hiding, I called the police. The black car was still outside, and I began to suspect that it might be related to the noises. When the police arrived, the car had disappeared. They didn't find anyone around the house, but they noticed signs of someone trying to force entry through the back. About a week later, while having dinner with my wife and brother, I saw a silhouette outside the dining room window. It was the same person from the black car, staring intently inside. When I shouted, the figure quickly disappeared. We started to feel unsafe in our own home. A few days later, while I was alone again, I heard knocks on the sliding glass door of the kitchen. I hesitated, but decided to check. As I approached, I saw the silhouette of a person through the glass. Frightened, I backed away and hid. The person continued knocking on the windows and trying to open the door. I called the police again, and this time, they arrived in time to see the black car speeding away. After these events, my family decided to move. The experience left us shaken, and even now, living in another state, I still feel a sense of anxiety when I am alone at home. I was a university student looking for ways to earn some extra money. Unlike my peers who worked in cafes or libraries, I opted for more physically demanding manual labor. I had skills in gardening and minor renovations, which led me to informal jobs, starting when I was 16 years old. It was a convenient arrangement, as I was called as needed and was available on weekends and evenings. One of my contacts was a gentleman who owned several rural properties. He frequently hired me to take care of the gardens and make minor renovations to his rental houses. It was common for him to leave me alone with a list of tasks, mainly gardening and painting. Being the youngest on the team, I earned their respect for my hard work and no complaints. I was well paid, and in one weekend, I could earn more than my friends in their part-time jobs. On a Friday, I received a call from this contact for urgent work on one of his country properties to be done on Saturday. He advised me to bring plenty of water and food as the property was isolated. I prepared my backpack with water, sandwiches, and cereal bars. He picked me up the next morning as I didn't have a car. During the trip, we talked about various subjects, and I didn't pay attention to the route. The property was in a remote area, surrounded by forests and fields. He left me with the necessary tools and said he would return at the end of the afternoon. My job was to mow the lawn, prune some trees, paint a fence, and do minor repairs to the house. The property had an air of abandonment, with vegetation growing wild and the house looking weathered by time. I started my work, immersed in the tranquility of the countryside. In the afternoon, I realized that my contact had not yet returned. I started to worry as my cell phone had no signal in that area. As the sun set, the temperature dropped, and I was dressed only in a light shirt and a jacket. I decided to check the house for some shelter. The house was old, with dusty furniture and a melancholic air. Without electricity, the night began to become unsettling. I made a fire outside to keep warm and decided to wait. Hearing noises in the forest and seeing shadows moving, my imagination began to work. I remembered stories of lost hikers and wild animals. Armed with a flashlight and a gardening machete, I stayed alert. Close to midnight, I saw lights approaching. It was my contact, who deeply apologized. He got confused with the schedules and thought another team member would come to pick me up. He paid me for the work and drove me back to town. After that experience, I always checked the work location in advance and carried an emergency kit, including an extra flashlight, batteries, and a portable charger for my cell phone. I am 32 years old and live alone in a relatively isolated country house with few neighbors about half a kilometer away. Generally, I am a solitary man, only going to town when necessary. Although semi-retired, I work for a few months of the year as a contractor. At the end of that autumn, I was organizing my equipment in the yard to store them in the shed, preparing for the approaching winter. While I was organizing things, I noticed something unusual. A man walking along the deserted road leading to my property. He wasn't carrying anything with him, no backpack or camping equipment, which seemed strange to me since the nearest town is a 4-hour walk away. He disappeared from view, and I, finding it odd, stopped thinking about it and finished my work in the yard. At night, after it got dark, I prepared dinner and relaxed. Suddenly, a loud bang from outside startled me. It seemed to come from the shed, as if the wooden door had been forcefully opened. Looking out the window, I saw the shed door open, something that had never happened before. Feeling insecure but believing I needed to check, I grabbed my rifle, confident that I wouldn't find anything dangerous. As I approached the shed, everything was silent. There were no signs of people or animals, and nothing seemed out of place. I carefully closed the door and returned to the house. Upon reaching the front door, I felt a strange sensation, like a premonition. Entering, I saw dirty shoe prints in the hallway leading to the guest room. My heart raced. With the rifle in hand, I quietly approached the room. I pressed my ear to the door and heard someone breathing on the other side. Before I could react, the doorknob turned and the door opened abruptly. I jumped back, pointing the rifle at the man with a huge shovel and an angry expression. He stopped at the door, holding the shovel like a weapon, with a furious look. I shouted for him to back off, trying to seem intimidating, though I was terrified. The man kept his distance but continued with an angry expression. At an impasse and not knowing what to do, he suddenly threw the shovel in my direction and ran back to the room, escaping through the window. I ran after him, but I saw him escape through the field in the darkness of the night. To this day, this man has never been identified, and his intentions remain a mystery. If I hadn't been armed or if he had surprised me, I probably wouldn't be here today. I'm 22 years old and live with my boyfriend. The story I'm about to tell happened in December 2022. To give some context, our house isn't in the best part of the city, so there's always something happening around here. Our house faces a secondary road, and our backyard is adjacent to our neighbors, who faces the main street. Our backyards are separated by a wire fence with a gate. According to the deed, this gate must exist so that firefighters and other emergency services can have full access to our residence if needed. The alley is so narrow that my boyfriend's pickup truck can barely make the turn to enter. That night, I was home alone, as my boyfriend was responding to an emergency call at work. It was about 10 p.m., and I had ordered something on iFood for delivery. I know it was a bit late to order food. We have a motion sensor camera facing the backyard. As I sat down to have dinner and watch TV, I received a notification that there was someone outside. Initially, I thought it might be our neighbors doing something, but I was wrong. When I checked the live feed of the camera, I saw a man with a large plastic bag crouched near the entrance and next to a tree on the other side of the backyard. I immediately called my boyfriend, telling him there was someone outside, to turn off the lights and keep the dogs quiet. I grabbed the dogs and hid in the closet until I heard from him. I didn't want to turn off the lights for fear someone would notice there were people at home, and I was too nervous to call the police. My boyfriend called the police for me. I checked the camera again to see if the man had left, and he was no longer there. Reviewing the footage, I realized he had walked through the neighbor's entrance, passed through the gate, and moved stealthily so as not to trigger the camera. When he started to approach our bedroom window, the motion light turned on, and the camera alerted that he was being recorded. Our bedroom window is large and located at the back of the house. He could have easily climbed up something to check if it was open, but fortunately, we had a tall solid wood dresser blocking the window, so he couldn't get in. My boyfriend called me back, saying the police were on their way. About 10 minutes later, I saw the police in our backyard. I went out to present myself and explained everything. As I was speaking with the officers, my boyfriend arrived. I provided the necessary information and showed them the footage. There wasn't much to be done, as the man was no longer there, but we wanted the incident to be recorded. The officer said it seemed like the man was looking for something in our backyard. We had a concrete mixer, 2 bicycles, and a plastic kiddie pool for the dogs. If he had taken any of those things, I might not have even called the police. It seemed like he knew the layout of our backyard and knew exactly where the gate and the camera were. I was afraid to be alone at home for several days after that, especially at night. The police stayed in the neighborhood for about 20 minutes and then left. Unfortunately, we never learned anything more about the case. Fortunately, we no longer live in that house, and I am truly relieved. I was 13 years old when this happened. I am a girl, and it was around Christmas time. My mother, father, and little sister went out shopping, but I stayed home. I knew they would be gone for a few hours, but I didn't mind, as I loved having the house to myself. My sister's slippers were at the main entrance, so she left through there, and I closed the door behind her. It's important to mention that the week before, a boy from the grade above mine came to talk to me at dismissal. I've never been very sociable, but this boy had tried to talk to me several times before. I always responded automatically, without paying much attention. He asked for my number, but I politely refused. After insisting a bit, he gave up and left laughing. Now, it was the first day of the Christmas holidays. As I mentioned, my parents and sister went shopping and would be out for a few hours. About an hour later, when it was dark, I closed all the blinds, made instant noodles, and watched a movie while eating. After dinner, while watching the movie, I got up to grab a cookie and heard noises outside the house. They sounded like footsteps. I held my breath to listen better, confirming that it wasn't just the house making noises. Yes, there were definitely footsteps in the yard. I turned off the TV, grabbed a kitchen knife, and ran to lock myself in the bathroom. I heard knocks on the window and then silence until the footsteps disappeared. A few seconds later, I heard 2 voices outside the house, one male and one female, and then silence again for a few minutes. I left the bathroom and approached the phone quietly to call the police. Then, the landline rang. It was about 5 steps away, and the noise startled me, making me drop the knife with a clang, followed by violent knocks on the back door. I picked up the knife again and hid in the small closet under the stairs. When I heard 2 pairs of footsteps running toward the front of the house, the small beep of the alarm system indicated that an outside door had been opened. How could I have been so careless as to not lock the front door when my family left? I controlled my breathing to remain as quiet as possible and held the knife tightly. I heard doors slamming and a strangely familiar voice shout, "Oh, where are you, little one? I know you're here." I believed it could be the boy from school. I waited in the closet, and the door burst open. There was a girl outside. Instinctively, I struck her with the knife. She started screaming, and blood dripped on the floor as she hit me hard in the face, making me fall. She ran out and slammed the front door behind her. It took me a minute to process that it was all over. I went to lock the front door and began to clean the blood from the floor with water and soap. I couldn't get to the phone in time to call the police because those people were already far away, so it seemed pointless. When I finished cleaning, I felt a chill run down my spine when I realized I never heard the boy leave. Then, silently, I checked every corner of the house with the knife in my hand, turning on all the lights and checking the upstairs and downstairs, all the bathrooms, closets, and possible hiding places. I found no one. I cleaned up all the mess I made and ensured that everything looked normal. About 45 minutes later, my parents and sister finally arrived home and found me watching TV. I know this may sound crazy, but to this day, I haven't told them what happened. I was too afraid they would never let me stay home alone again, and I didn't want that as I value my privacy a lot. I just want to tell everyone to be careful because I feel that if I had done anything different, besides not calling the police, things could have ended much worse for me. I was 18 years old at the time and it was the beginning of summer. I was on school vacation and didn't have a job, so most of my time was spent at home, playing video games, watching YouTube or TV, or just relaxing. That day, my parents were out of town for a few days, leaving me alone at home. This was common and never a big deal. Sometimes I invited friends over, but that night, I was just enjoying the time to myself. I was watching a rerun of my favorite show on Netflix while also fiddling with my phone. It was late, I don't know the exact time, but I think it was around 11 or midnight when someone knocked on the front door. I paused the TV and went to see who it was. I almost didn't register in my mind that it was very late, but fortunately, I realized this before carelessly opening the door. I looked through the peephole and saw two men, both wearing similar clothes, just waiting for me to answer. I stood there wondering whether or not to let them know I was home, asking what they wanted. I ended up staying silent, just watching, waiting for them to leave. But a few seconds later, they called out, "Hello, we're here to speak with Mr. and Mrs. Lopez," referring to my parents. Confused, I still remained silent, knowing it was too late for any kind of visit, even if it was important. After a minute, the men looked at each other, said something quietly, and left the porch. The exterior lights were off, so I couldn't see where they went, and I didn't see any car headlights, which made me wonder if they had come on foot, which would be even stranger. I went back to the TV, but left it on pause for a while to listen if they came back. It wasn't long before I heard footsteps outside the house. They went to the porch and, instead of knocking as before, started walking to the side of the house. I got up and ran to the back window. When they reached the yard, I saw them open the gate and enter. I hid from the window so as not to be seen, but I could hear them approaching the back door. They started talking and messing with the door. I took the opportunity to grab my phone and hide in the garage. I called the police, explaining the potential invasion that was happening. In less than a minute, a loud noise echoed through the house and the back door was opened. Their footsteps crossed the house and went straight to the stairs, heading upstairs to the bedrooms. When they opened the door and entered, they closed it behind them, but after that, there were no more sounds. I waited 10 terrible and silent minutes until the police arrived. When they did, there were quick footsteps upstairs, and the two men started to argue. Some officers entered through the back door while another helped me out of the garage. The men didn't resist arrest, but also didn't explain why they were there. Despite some time having passed and it being quite obvious that they weren't simply robbing the house, the only thing they could be charged with was home invasion. It scares me to this day, thinking that they seemed to be looking for my parents and almost seemed like they were going to wait upstairs until they returned from their trip. Sometimes I wonder if I should have shown myself and if that would have prevented the invasion, but something about their behavior tells me they would have still invaded and done whatever was necessary with me. My name is Jane, and I am 22 years old. I live in a small town, known for its long winters and streets always covered in snow. Here, in my lonely house, I take care of my newborn son, a task that keeps me awake on many sleepless nights. I clearly remember one specific night, a few years ago, when I heard rumors about people dressed as clowns terrorizing the neighborhood with knives. I was so engrossed in my own world, taking care of my baby, that I barely paid attention to these rumors. One morning, while taking out the trash, something strange caught my attention. There were footprints in the snow, leading directly to the window of the room where my son slept. As I approached, I noticed hand marks on the window screen. At that moment, I felt a shiver of fear, but I tried to convince myself it was nothing. In the days that followed, a sharp and distant sound disturbed my nights. It sounded like a howl, and I thought it was just street cats. However, at dawn, I saw new footprints in the snow, creating strange patterns between the houses. I began to feel increasingly uneasy. Then, on that fateful night, while feeding my son, I heard a dragging sound against the wall of the house. I froze when I saw a shadowy figure at the back door, holding a large kitchen knife. He slid the blade against the glass and tapped gently on the door. With my heart racing uncontrollably and my son in my arms, something inside me awakened. I stood up, faced the figure through the window, and said in the firmest voice I could muster, "I've already called the police." To my surprise, he hesitated and after a few moments, disappeared into the snow. That encounter put me on constant alert. I began to reflect on the strength I found that night to protect my son. Despite the fear and exhaustion, I discovered that my greatest strength is the determination to protect those I love. I never saw that threatening shadow again, but that experience transformed me. I learned that even in the shadows of the night, my courage and love for my son are my most loyal companions. We have come to the end of our journey today, exploring the darkest and most mysterious corners of the human experience. We hope these stories have sparked your curiosity and sharpened your imagination. If you found yourself intrigued, don't forget to share this video with your friends and leave your comment below. We would love to hear your opinions and theories about these unfathomable enigmas. Thank you for watching. Stay safe and stay curious. It will always be a pleasure to be here with you. Until next time.